And I always like to tell people, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you wake up in the morning? Like, that's what you should be doing. That's what you should be thinking about.
Welcome back to the Modern Craftsman podcast, guys. Today we have founder and CEO of Vitruvius, built a luxury custom home building operation in Park City, a Duke-trained emergency medicine physician, board-certified ER doctor, and New Orleans Saints sideline physician who transitioned into construction starting in 2025. First rehabilitating historic French Quarter properties in New Orleans and then building luxury residential in Nassau and the islands before planting in Park City. I just want to understand how he goes from being a doctor and practicing medicine and getting into the custom home building world, but also what are the similarities between those two fields. They're both super high stakes, super emotional, and we're going to dig into it all.
This podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. We've all heard the trends and the buzzwords, but you know what never goes out of style? Quality. That's the kind of thing you can stake your reputation on. And Andersen products have proven themselves time and time again for over 120 years, backed by a leading number of U.S. patents, tested through time, and supported by over 1,000 service providers nationwide, available to assist on site. Andersen isn't building for trends, they're building to last with products that are trusted by pros and proven through time. See product and warranty details at andersenwindows.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Harnish Workwear. You know, they recognize the significance of establishing a reputable and trustworthy brand, which is why they offer H-Label. Elevate your crew's appearance with our comprehensive, personalized uniform service designed to simplify the process of prominently featuring your company logo. Whether it's through embroidery or printing, we'll collaborate closely with you to ensure that your team exudes a cohesive and polished experience. And their skilled in-house printers, designers, and embroiders deliver your customized gears promptly, fully prepared to use. Check out more at harnishworkwear.com. I got a very pointed question for you. When you gave up medicine and you decided to get into building, financially, what did that look like for you? Meaning, like, what did you have savings, in the bank? Did you have a ton of money in the bank? Did you do it on a whim? I think from the people that we've talked to, when they make a big career change, oftentimes they have that financial security. Some don't. Some do it for the pure, like, I need to get out of what the hell I'm doing. But I think that is such a under-asked question, and I think that people in that position are oftentimes challenged with, when do I make this move? So if I may pry
away, man. Nick, great being on and talking with you. I'll step back a little bit and talk a little bit about my kind of the thing that led up to that, if you're okay with it. I always loved, my dad tagged me to help build our family home when I was in middle school. And that's when I really fell in love with that kind of negative entropy concept, right? Like it gets us as builders, and certainly as customer luxury home builders at some point in time, right? Like it grabs us. And that was my grab moment. That being said, I always say we grew up clipping coupons, because we did. We had the things that we needed. We didn't always have the things that we wanted. Mm-hmm. And I think that my mom was a nurse, and so that drove me into medicine. That was a stable career, rock solid, but I just kept being drawn back to, even toward the end of medical school, I was working, doing side jobs with a plumber buddy of mine or an electrician buddy of mine. My dad and I did our first home renovation when I was a fourth year medical student. And so I just kept being drawn back to it. And I always like to tell people, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you wake up in the morning? Like, that's what you should be doing. That's what you should be thinking about. And I kept going back to that. And so fast forward, obviously I had a first medical career. I trained at Duke, trained in emergency medicine, met my lovely wife there. We came back down. We started I started my first career in New Orleans as an ER doctor, but I was really running two careers. I was working in the hospital. I was a sideline doctor for the Saints. That was kind of one career, my medical career. But the second career was I started doing historic home redevelopment. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I was thinking about it, dreaming about it. It was the first thing that I kept waking up thinking about and wanting to talk about. And so that built really organically. And, you know, a duplex turned into a triplex, turned into an eightplex, into some smaller, you know, commercial, luxury, historic redevelopment projects. And I just kept climbing that ladder, went on to do some stuff with joint venture groups in London and some private island development stuff. And at that point in time, I had really, from a financial standpoint, and to circle back to your question, had gotten to the point where I could choose. Do I need to stay in the hospital and continue to do this or not? And I think at that point in time, it was a very clear choice. And I talked with my wife. She was incredibly supportive. And I said, I'm leaving medicine behind and I'm going to pursue the thing that I absolutely love doing every day. And that was a few years back, and the rest has been history, Nick.
I feel like that's every parent's nightmare, to be like, my child graduated from high school, went to a college, went and did med school, and then they're like, oh, we're going to give it up to go back into construction. What do we tell our friends?
Absolutely. I always say I'm the most overeducated builder in the country, you know. And I think that certainly, yeah, my parents were like, so yeah, you're giving up an esteemed career as an emergency physician to go swing hammers. And I was like, actually, my dad, he's a builder as well. So he was supportive, but yeah, that is every parent's worst nightmare for sure.
Was there anyone that learned of this transition that did judge you that actually got to you?
One of my best friends, he's a radiologist. We've known each other since medical school. And I remember the day, you know, we have a group thread, I'm sure you guys do as well, with your close friends. And I said, hey guys, I'm hanging the stethoscope up. And he said, you're crazy. And I said, let's circle back in a few years. And what's really interesting now is
he's like, nah, I'm out of this group thread. Bye.
No, Nick, it's like on Shawshank Redemption, I was the guy who escaped prison, and he's the one who's like, hey, how did you get out? You know, and
so he came around.
Oh, he absolutely came around. Yeah. And he's, you know, fast forward a few years, he's like, you know, I'm the dumbest boy in school now, you know, and he wants the roadmap, but yeah, I mean. And that was a reason that was a reasonable supposition at the time, right? Like, hey man, are you sure you want to do this, right? Like, you're doing great. You don't need to do this. But it wasn't about needing to. It was about chasing something I'm incredibly passionate about. You know it probably better than most.
Yeah, I mean, there's still those comments that you read or comments that people make to you at an event or an outing that you go home and you think about, and you're like, fuck, like, are they right? Like, you know, am I wrong here? And I don't think I certainly don't talk about it a lot. Certainly don't be like, hey, this kid, said this thing and it really bothered me. I just shove it way down deep and hopefully it doesn't resurface. But
you gotta air that shit out, man. You gotta bring it to light, man. That's what I've learned over, the last 20 years or so.
What do you think was the risk at that point? Like, if you felt that you were financially secure enough to make that career shift, is that the type of career where it's like, all right, you're going to walk away from this, and I guess the industry terminology is hang the stethoscope up, but like, is that okay? We walked away from this. I can never go back.
I don't think it's that you can never go back. I was actually really insecure. I know this might sound crazy, but I was a little bit insecure initially, being like, people might find this builder who is like, sort of executing top of market luxury homes, but at the same time, like, he left medicine. Is he a little crazy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was actually really insecure about having a first career and one that was, I think, a pretty well regarded first career, and then completely moving into construction. I was candidly pretty insecure about that for a while. I didn't want to talk about it,
Obviously building was a passion of yours and continues to be a passion of yours, but on the other side of the coin, were there aspects of your career in medicine that you were just looking to get away from, or was it more that just like this was my calling?
It felt like a calling. I would say I was running towards something way more so than I was running away from something.
That makes sense. I don't know enough about the medical field to be like, all right, I had to get out because of this. I mean, I know certain aspects of it, especially if you're working under your own license and the insurance and all of that, and having to jump through hoops, but I don't know enough about that industry to be like, well, this is the common thing that everyone wants to get away from, being in that field. I think the switch is so interesting to me, and that Insecurity is also, it's interesting for me to hear, because you would think that making that transition from being in the field of medicine to then building homes, that would be okay, like, I got this. I did the hard thing. Like, I went to school, I became an emergency room doctor, physician, and now I'm going to build houses. Like, this should be easy at this point. This should be I should be able to fly this flag, and people would hire me because I'm obviously professional, I'm intelligent, respected. It's neat to hear that you had insecurities from. I could see the insecurities manifesting themselves where, like, okay, this is a step backwards. Like, what are people going to think of me? But not from a client perspective. Because, like, to me, it's like, all right, well, he obviously has his shit together if this is the career he's leaving and walking away from and coming into the building career.
Yeah, I could pull on that a little bit. I don't think it was, I had all the faith and confidence in the world in myself. It was more of just like my perception of what other people might think. And candidly, really, since coming into market and doing more client development focused work over the past few years, I've kind of dispensed with it. And it's a freedom that I just love. Like, when you can kind of say, I don't so much care what other people really think about me, I can just live my authentic self every day or most days. That's been really freeing for me. And so kind of just pulling that, what do I think people think about me, right? I mean, Nick, we go into these client meetings and I think we think about that. We deal with almost exclusively ultra high net worth people, right? Like, what shirt we wear, what brand of shirt we wear, like, all of those things matter. What our headquarters looks like, what our projects, like, I'm so crazy, like, OCD maniacal. And I know, Nick, you and I have had these conversations of, like, sometimes it's hard for me to candidly walk a job site or candidly, like, because like the way that we see things, I kind of like relay it to people as like, we're sort of like Neo seeing the Matrix, and everyone else is just sort of living in the Matrix itself. And so I think that's there's a lot of things that you constantly have to be really aware of, as it relates to the clients that we get to serve, of course.
Yeah, I think, speaking of that being maniacal, I have a list of things and people I'm supposed to get back to this week, and I could very easily take 5 minutes and draft up an email and be in great position with that person. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, no, I need to put together a PDF presentation. It needs to be on brand. It needs to include like a project that is so perfectly curated to exactly what they want to build.
Yes.
And and those, like, I actually enjoy that part of me, and I'm always trying to kind of up the ante. It is a swift kick in the nuts when it doesn't work, or it's like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Yeah. But it is this, kind of chase of trying to be better and position us better, especially in the markets that you and I are trying to serve. So speaking of which, coming from the medical background, did you establish a pretty good network of people that you ultimately ended up building for or being referred through?
Candidly, when my wife and I and our 3 kids moved to Park City going on 8 years ago, I really, it was a new market. I mean, builders in new markets, that's a new thing, new subs, all of those things. And so, and that was a new muscle for me to work on, because I was my own capital partner and development partner up until some of these JV projects. And even those were very small, tight-knit groups that I didn't really have to do a lot of business development with. And so, moving into market, I did a spec project here in Park City, and, that helped get our name out there, and then just started climbing the ladder. I mean, it's so funny. One of my badges of honor to myself, and I'm sure you do this, like, I have these stupid little things, but like, a really high level architect that I might have cold emailed 2 or 3 years ago, I had dinner with the other night, like, and things, our firm has seen such tremendous growth over like such a relatively short period of time, but I forget that every day because I'm chasing it like just maniacally chasing it. But sometimes, thankfully, my wife or, my chief operating, he'll be like, dude, just step back. Or my wife will say, hey, where were you a year ago? Yeah. And I think it's so great to have those people in our lives, I'll speak for myself, who reframe things so that I can say, wow, thanks for reframing that. That was great. I'm just so constantly on this chase.
It's hard to look backwards and recognize how far you've come in a year or the 5 years, right? It's you're looking at what happened last week and why am I not making progress this week?
Yeah.
What do you think you would attribute most of that to? Just personality type?
I think it's a great question. It really is kind of always how I've been. My dad taught me to work early on. I learned my work ethic, I think, from my dad. I was that kid who was like trying to hustle, like cutting lawns, in middle school, pushing the lawnmower around the neighborhood, just knocking on doors. Like, I was that kid.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit of it, I call it starvation anxiety, but it's definitely a real thing. But I think that I wanted to. I loved working. I love that production of things. That's a big part of like purpose and self-worth for me. And fortunately, getting to do it in this arena is like, it's amazing. But I think, to circle back to your question, it's always how I've been. Like,
Do you think that insecurity still plays a small part in that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that I listen to a lot of podcasts and founders and, and I think that, most, if not all, would say, you get both, right? Like, you don't just get this maniacal like chase without a little bit of that. And I think that fortunately that's helped from a drive standpoint. I don't know. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of this is rooted in insecurity and anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think though, like, if you, where that's coming from, or at what point in your life that showed up, because I can relate to that.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. But like, to pinpoint at what point in my life that anxiety and insecurity began to like rear its head and become responsible for a lot of the habits that I have and the things that I do, it's difficult. Like, I don't feel like it was my parents' upbringing or, like a certain situation that made me that way. I think so much of it is just personality, and obviously mixed with like the nature nurture part of my upbringing and the chaos of the household and the family and not ever having enough money. And like you said, the starvation anxiety, like, I think it all is part of it. But it is crazy how much that anxiety and insecurity is responsible for a lot of the drive that we have.
Yeah, I think, personally, even just this morning, I woke up, I'm getting ready, and all of a sudden I was sitting there and I'm like, I don't have any projects coming up. Just like completely, I've been up for 3 minutes and I'm like, what? shit, I actually don't have anything to fill the calendar. Meanwhile, I mean, there's, I'm looking at my CRM earlier. It's like, you have $50 million in potential opportunities. But in my mind, there's none. And thankfully, like now in my life, I have found the ability to take a deep breath and say, okay, like, no, this isn't real, and none of this, quote unquote, none of this matters. You're chasing something because you want to chase it, and of course, I want to support my family and all those things. But when you strip it back to the basics of life, this doesn't really matter. And I can kind of find my way through that, and I do think, I feel or I can understand how people feel that way, and I shouldn't say I understand, but the fact that people feel that way that I felt this morning, but never are able to get to the deep breath and be okay with it, like that frightens me.
Yeah.
Because like that's where people have the severe anxiety and feel as though the world is crashing around on them, and they have simply zero control over anything. When it's like, wait a second, you have way more control than you think you do. But that mindset or that personality is just, I mean, that I'm thankful that's how I can kind of justify my internal anxiety.
Well, but I think you hit on something bigger, which is how do we, dealing in a high stakes environment? I mean, we run big teams, we do big projects, 8-figure projects. When you pick up the phone and field those tough calls, whether it's from a client or a subcontractor, your project manager, I've worked hard over the past few years, and it almost feels like maybe the second stage of life, like midlife. I'm okay with that. But really working on myself and how I internally respond to the world around me, right? And I've really worked hard over the past few years at developing a healthy cadence of morning guided meditation, morning reading, a tight-knit group of both professional and personal people that I rely heavily upon, that I share tough stuff with. Because I think that fortunately, I used to hold on to those things, whether it was in medicine or tough parts of projects, right? Like, we think we're not supposed to talk about those things, when in reality, when you kind of throw it out there on the table, everybody's like, oh man, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
My wife and I are dealing with some stuff as well. Or, I have an aging parent and they have dementia, or, I'm going through this deal with my company, or whatever it is. And that's such a positive feedback cycle for me, because now I'm the one who has the confidence to bring that stuff to the table and talk about it. And I can speak about it in a trusted environment, of course, but like you can talk about things authentically, because we're all just trying to show up and do our best every day. That's been really empowering for me and the people around me, I hope.
Yeah, I would say being in a room with people that are like, especially professionally, I definitely struggle more on the personal side, and being in a room of people on a personal level, just for any type of personal conversation. I mean, Tyler, like, truthfully, is probably the only person I talk to about like any deep personal, struggles I'm dealing
charging
with.
You.
You should start charging me. I would probably do less.
Maybe I'll have a second career where I go back to school and I'll become like a therapist.
It's just like you just add it to your LinkedIn. It's like Nick's counselor.
Therapist.
Did you? It's interesting. It's so commonplace within our field to need a network of people like that, where we're struggling with challenges of business, jobs, clients. Having a separate career from the building industry, did you feel that it was quite as prominent in the medical field to feel as though you needed this like network of people to help get you through the day-to-day? Like, I wonder if this is just plaguing the construction industry, because I don't know a lot of other people who are like, damn, I really just need this network of people to help keep me going.
I think there's some mutual suffering, right? Like if you look at like, yes, in medicine, my childhood best friend in the world, he's a nurse practitioner, still works in the ER. He calls me and tells me like what I'm missing out on. And of course, that's tongue in cheek, right? But like he's recounting tales of like the struggles, right?
Yeah.
And nothing has changed. Like I just talked to another ER doctor buddy of mine this morning. Not a damn thing has changed in that world. And so, yes, very much so. I think in any industry, I bet attorneys talk to each other and they're like, these freaking clients and or whatever it is, right? Interior designers talk about us all the time.
I'm pretty sure they sign an NDA not to talk about us.
So the problems transcend our industry.
I think there's something different about the build industry and the phenotype of builder. I don't think we talk about that stuff as much. I think architects do a great, like Nick, when I was at a few networking events over the last couple of weeks, architects love talking with each other. Hey man, what projects you got going on? I feel like builders are always like, oh, who's that guy over there? Or, whatever it is. And I feel like, you and a few other kind of guys from around the country have done a really good job of kind of like opening that stuff up and being like, hey guys, we can like all talk and, which I think is great. But guys like Brad and but I think we need more of that. I mean, I have I joined YPO about 18 months ago, and that's been a just incredible community to tap into. But we have a small custom home builder forum in YPO. And that's great to talk through things. And we're from all over the country. And, I love those guys.
They're really, I think our industry, medicine is also very high stakes and very emotional, but building is is high stakes and emotional from a completely different direction. Where it's like, medicine, I feel like is, I talk to people in medicine and they talk about, I'm not discrediting it, but they'll just talk about, oh yeah, this person died, and like to me that's like holy shit, like, and they're like, no, this is every day, this happened. And I'm like, I'm not built for that, and I just don't think I would manage that well, because it would just be failure after failure. And we got and then I got to thinking, I'm like, I deal with failure after failure every day. It's just like it's not death, right? And it's like something else. But it's largely emotional because death might be easier. Yeah. Charles might know the answer to that. It's like, that's at
least for
just
us.
Different. Just different.
Yeah. Different.
What made you choose Park City?
Oh man, I'd like to say that I researched it and we chose the best place. Candidly, we were living in La Jolla, California. We were about a block from the beach, and that's where we were going to kind of raise our kids and family. And then when COVID hit, things it just felt a little restrictive for us and just a little bit off. And so Park City was we needed an airport. I was still doing JV projects, and we just needed an airport, and we wanted to try the mountains. And we talked to a couple of friends we had never visited here. So it truly is better to be lucky than good for Park City.
So how, had you started the business prior to moving to Park City?
I had been just doing development stuff under another umbrella. But when I moved to Park City, that's when I started Vitruvius. That's when I essentially, like I said, I started the spec project and really started building out my network here. And
so that had to be part of your plan simultaneously to start the new business and find a market that support what you wanted to be doing, right? Or was it truly just like, we want to get out of California and go to the mountains?
It truly was. It might sound crazy, but it truly was. We wanted to get out of California and find something new. But what was really interesting was it only took a few months for me to kind of look around and talk to some people. And I said, I can't believe what's going on here. For me, Utah was always very much off the beaten path. And I think for a lot of people it was as well. And so I remember talking to people and they said, you're late to the party. And I said, you guys haven't been to a really good party before, and I said, you guys haven't developed in other places. You guys don't know what this place is like. And I think that, it kind of speaks to that there's a great but tight knit kind of insular community here. And I I don't think they've ever had to look outside and deal with what California coastal community is dealing with, or, restrictive regulations around, private island development, whatever that is. Right. And I think that this has and continues to be such an incredibly fruitful market that I feel like, that viewpoint is just a little bit jaded, and it was one that I was candidly really thankful to hop into.
And as far as fruitful goes, is that the type of projects, the money, the location, jurisdictional restrictions, like what is entailed in that being a fruitful market? Like, is it the ease of being able to build it? Is it the quality of labor out there? Is it just the type of clients that are hiring you to build homes?
Yeah, great question. I think it's multifactorial. I would say, number one, Utah's a relatively easy place to build compared to a lot of other jurisdictions. Number two, I would say
why?
that...
Why is that? Hold on, why?
Because he's coming from California.
Candidly, Nick, I would just say that once things get through an architectural review committee for a community, then generally speaking, comparatively speaking, the permitting process versus other, let's just say other Intermountain places like Aspen, Jackson, we're 8 weeks for a building permit here, Nick.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get at. Is like what part of it's easier?
It's wild though too, because you would think anytime that you're in nature or building in a mountainous area that they're going to be more stringent with the requirements, and that process is going to be more difficult.
It's interesting talking with a lot of architects and some other builders that are primarily based in places like Jackson and Aspen. It seems as though those layers of bureaucracy get put on over the years, and it just makes it incrementally harder and harder and harder to develop. And we just candidly haven't had that. And I attribute it a lot to I think kind of that pioneer spirit of Utah. I mean, this community, and I think that you have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is, we have a significant Mormon, or we call it LDS population here, Latter-day Saints population here. Candidly, they're hardworking. They're very business focused. They're very family focused. And I attribute a lot of Utah's success to Mormons and the roots and the things that they've done out here, which I think is incredible. It aligns candidly with what, I align with. I want to, be able to run my business. I want to be able to raise my family how I want to raise them. And it feels like a place where it's kind of a live and let live type place. And that is still pretty deeply ingrained throughout Utah. And so I think that it translates, of course, into the build community and fighting. Obviously, there's important building codes and that types of thing, but I think that by and large, it's enough. But I don't think it's overkill at this point in time, and hopefully it doesn't get there anytime soon.
So the comment about being late to the party, do you feel that that's just people who have been there and have become somewhat blind to what it's like to build there? Because obviously there's still a ton of opportunity there with what you're doing.
It's really interesting because the communities that I was focused on when I came into market, kind of 5-6 years ago, are not the communities we're focused on now. And so we just continue to see more and more places, and primarily they're gated communities or, private developments. And I think we just continue to see more, and the average build cost continues to go up and up. I would say, high level, we have Reed Hastings. He's doing a whole Powder Mountain development. Safely, that's 500 home sites. It's probably going to be more. There's another private, mountain community that's another, kind of 500 home sites. Marcella Golf, which is Tiger Woods, Deer Valley, that's another 500 home sites. There's another community called Promontory here. That's another. They just announced an expansion of 2 more golf courses and another, I think it's 500 or 1,000 home sites. These are crazy numbers.
Yeah. Hold on. So when you these communities, 500 home sites, average price on those homes across the 500.
Nick, you can't come out here, man. You gotta stay in Boston.
Charles, I have been asked to move to like literally 10 other states, and none of only one of them is on the ocean, and that's like my wife's one rule is like,
got it.
I have to be on the ocean, so
Okay.
not moving to Utah. So
Right,
either anyway. So, but you're talking $10 million homes plus.
Yeah.
And that, Tyler, this is what I was saying the other day. This is nuts.
Yeah.
Like that amount of, you just rattled off 3,500 homes.
And I'll tell you guys, it's quality of skiing. We're bookended by the Olympics in 2034. Our airport is a massive commodity. Being able to fly, my wife and I fly direct to Paris, and we can make a 3-day trip to Paris. Like those types of things are, and it's a well-run airport, right? Like things in Utah are really well run. And so, maybe circle back to a couple of questions ago, as far as like, reasons why, building is really great out here. Salt Lake City's a great sub base. So as opposed to some of these other, Mountain West communities where people have to drive in 90 minutes and they can kind of name their own price to execute the level of craftsmanship that we need, we still might have a couple of top tier varsity, we call them varsity players, in our roster for every phase item, but there's constantly some upward pressure from Salt Lake Valley that keep our build costs relatively level. I would say in general, our build costs are about 70% of what you might see in a Jackson or an Aspen. And so people coming from other markets and architects coming from other markets go, this is freaking great. Like we can actually like still design a beautiful home and it's more approachable. And, or clients say even better, which is, man, we can actually like let our guys go totally crazy and really do something, generational legacy asset. So
are most of these second homes, third homes? I mean, are they primary? Yeah. That's even more wild, where it's like your second home is 10 plus million.
But that's what I had this conversation about, like our market in Boston. And Boston's great, and there's an incredible amount of wealth here. A, it's very quiet, and B, they're not spending the money here. They live in a modest, I'm using air quotes, like a modest $5 or $6 million home, right? Which is pretty typical in the affluent community. They're not spending, they're not building, they're not building 10, 20, $30 million homes here, but they have ones elsewhere. Yeah. They have a ski house or a house down in Florida that they spend 30, 40, $50 million on. And it's like, why would I spend my money here? I'd rather live, I'd rather spend my time in Florida.
Well, not only that, Nick, and we see that as well, but I would say that when you're in a luxury, a strongly solidified luxury market like Park City, I think that there's a lot of safety and security, right, in spending money for that asset, because people know that asset's going to grow in a market like Park City. There's really, I mean, I don't know, it's got to be a top 10 luxury market in the country, maybe. I mean, disagree with me, but
What?
No, you're right. I think the protection is something that is valued even at that price point, where I think there's a lot of noise out there where it's like once you get to that number, it doesn't matter what it's worth. And there's probably some layer of truth to that, but they're still looking at it as, well, what is my potential, sell price if I were to liquidate this asset?
Absolutely. They're always looking at that, right?
Right. It's like very few people are looking at it as like, I'm just going to build whatever the hell I want and never recoup the money. I mean, Ken Griffith may be building his $1 billion house down in Florida, but that's Ken.
There's a lot of coastline in Florida. I mean, your wife might. That'd be a good place.
I think we're staying here.
So
gotta make it work.
Relocating to Park City and then establishing the business. It's 5-6 years, call it, at this point for you. Can you still really capture what the vision was when you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to start, this is what I want it to be? Like, can you still recall what that looks like? Because things have changed and progressed so quickly for you that it's probably hard to understand what your, like, the true impetus was for this. But can you give us some insight as to when you're like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want it to be?
God, that's a great question. I felt like I had seen the top of the mountain in some of the projects that I had done overseas. And there was a small part of me, I think, almost like proselytizing that a little bit, because when I came into this market, I felt like there were big ski homes and there was a few people doing some really top luxury homes, but I felt like we still had a ways to go. And I felt like as we've gotten more attention from other architecture and design firms from across the country, owners reps firms, everyone's had to, like, it's really has been kind of a study in the rising tide raises all ships, because I think that people have brought really unique design aesthetic and architectural elements and landscape design elements into our market. And some of these things that has I think continued to elevate Park City's game. To circle back to how I saw the vision for Vitruvius built when I came in the market versus today, I would say that's been an evolution. I mean, candidly, the quality of clients and the relationships that I've built, I know it gets thrown around a lot, but God, that's one of my favorite things. I mean, you know, I was at a 70th birthday party of one of our clients, and it's like intimate family, and it's myself and the architect and my COO. And I was like, what a gift this is. I mean, this guy is one of the most quality guys I've ever met in my life. And to get to serve those people and get to be such an intimate part of their relationship and to get to kind of build that forever home. You know, and I think that, Nick, one thing that's not really talked about is a lot of these people's second or third homes has always been their dream as well, right? Yeah. And so these are people that, you know, have built these incredible businesses over decades and got to the point where they can say, this is it for me. This is that multi-generational home that we're now kind of like going to spend on, because the kids are coming out, the grandkids are coming out. This is where we're retiring. This is where we're going to be spending 2 or 3 months a year. And so I feel like for them, they get to express that as well. And it's a celebration for them of maybe a lot of the hard work that they've done. You know, they were in the grind with us, you know, 25, 30, 40 years ago, you know?
No, I think you're right. You know, when we build homes that are everything to our client, that it is a dream, right? You know, and I think that's why we align a lot with clients that are looking to build their forever home, whether they stay there forever or not. Like that's the way they're approaching it. Yeah. You know, and I was at one earlier today, and you know, I swung by we had to capture something for a video, and they're like, Nick, you can come literally anytime you want. Like, don't even ask, just come. Yeah. Like the house is yours. And I know, like, you know, they're you know, kind of stretching the truth on that, which is fine. Sure. I'm not going to randomly show up, but that feeling is like, no, we nailed it. You know, like we this was such a fun project for us and them, and you know, and it was because we had the same goal. You know, it wasn't transactional in the sense that, you know, we just need to make as much money as we can on this project, period. It was, you know, we need to be profitable as a business, but our goal is to accomplish the home that they hired us to build. And how do we do that? And that's something that you specifically have talked about quite a bit, is, you know, the monthly executive summary reports that you do for your client, and even the real-time costing models. That talk to me about what that looks like, because especially at this high net worth, you know, really luxury space, you're dealing with people that are probably used to executive reports, probably used to real-time cost tracking, where the run-of-the-mill cowboy builder that doesn't have a process might build an amazing home, but that's going to suck for them because they don't know how, like, what's happening and how this process is unfolding. So what does that actually look like, you know, to the client?
I love that you brought that up, and I do think this ties into AI, which I think is worth at least spending a couple minutes on. You know, we always just have thought differently about what our unique value proposition is. I think craftsmanship, trying to be, you know, remotely on schedule, that's table stakes in luxury, right? Like, let's be honest. And so for us, I always wanted to approach our projects, because having been on the other side of it as a client and developer, and understanding what's ideal for that. And I would say that you hit the nail on the head industry wide, and especially as it relates to luxury, this concept that like, well, it's cost plus, it'll cost what it's going to cost, there's going to be change orders and all of these things. I think that's bullshit. And I think that we've built systems and process behind that to function as our client would trust their family office. As our client, we see ourselves on a family office board managing their luxury residential asset. That's how we view ourselves. And that's the standard that we set ourselves to at our firm. And everything that we've built out, we haven't looked at it and compared ourselves to other builders. We've looked at comparing ourselves more to family offices of like, what do our clients expect? They want an executive summary that they can read about their liquid assets, their illiquid assets, their trust structure, like whatever those things are, that's what they're used to seeing. And so that's what we provide them. They read it on the plane, they read it, on a commuter, whatever those things are. Then they have all of the backup that they can dig into at any point in time, because our clients, when they want something, they get it. And it's our job to deliver it when and where and how they want it. That's our people. That's the clients we serve. That's very unique. And what I would say is that our entire system has been structured around that. And so our COO says this all the time. He says, we're wealth managers with muddy boots on. I mean, we're managing very high level project. We're deploying, and they're trusting us with 8 figures of assets just for one project, right? I mean, I'm sure you've done multiple projects for people. And so I would say that the number that I'm most proud of, Nick, at our firm is contract to completion in terms of the variance. What we tell the clients is going to cost through pre-construction and all of those things. And I know you and I have talked at length about this versus what it ends up costing. And
what's that number?
Fuck, man, we're hitting like 1% and 2%.
This podcast is brought to you by Bolster. That's Bolster. So if you listen to the Modern Craftsman for a while, you'll probably know that Nick and I talk a lot about protecting your time. Too many of us builders spend our days building and our nights writing estimates. If that sounds familiar, check out Bolster. It's an all-in-one platform built for residential contractors that combines estimating, takeoffs, proposals, project management, and payments into one system. With Bolster, you can estimate projects up to 5 times faster, increase your average job size by 20% with options and upgrades, and sell twice as many jobs with professional proposals that help homeowners get excited about their project. That means less administrative work, more profitable projects, and more time actually running your business. Head to bolsterbuilt.com to see a sample proposal and book your free demo today. Is that just because of the expectation that you're setting forth?
I think expectation is a huge part of it, Tyler. And what I would say is now, because we have this unique value prop and we're purposefully principle-led in a smaller firm, we now get to pick and choose which projects are good fits and what clients are good fits for us. So now we're actually using it to weed out people that just don't align with the way that we run things. There's clients chasing numbers out there. They think their home can be built for 9 when in reality it's going to take 12. And there's no magic. I always say there's no magic bucket of emotions, and there's no magic money printing press that I know of. And so when you can set realistic expectations, if clients say, man, I actually really appreciate you saying that. We haven't heard that before. We've talked to 2 other guys and they've just kind of said, yeah, we'll make that work. And I think being able to speak authoritatively and being able to show people your systems and your process, I love this triangulation. People want to meet clients that you've worked with, people want to see your work, and they want to understand your process. So when you triangulate those 3 things and it's a really good fit and you go through that process with a prospective client, that's really powerful. Because as it relates to Paretti's principle, my job as COO is to eliminate the 20 or 10% of prospective clients that are going to be huge hugely problematic for 2 or 3 or 4 years. These are long-term relationships. So that's that. And what I would say about AI is that now every client has an owner's rep, ChatGPT, Claude, that is sitting at a screen that has access to their entire process. And if any builder thinks that people aren't looking at contracts, finding you, going through your contract, going through your invoices and deliverables, and not using that, they're crazy, and it's going to hit them very hard. And so what I would say is AI is a magnifier. If you have a really tight systems and process, we have internal communications with Slack, our internal financials for every project to run via QuickBooks, all of our approvals, everything is super dialed in, live financials, all of those things. We've spent years building it, and fortunately now AI is a magnifier for that. Yeah. But a lot of builders maybe are running some old playbooks or a little bit more haphazard about things. It's gonna hurt. And this is a high stakes world, and it's really gonna hurt, Nick.
I think, not to take anything away from the percentages and the numbers, but I feel that so many people just don't understand how valuable those realistic expectations and how valuable it is to ensure that your clients trust you and that you align with your clients from the outset of any project, because like there's so many tools. The numbers are the numbers. It's very black and white. You know, they either work or they don't. But it just ultimately, for me, in my experience, comes down to what you sold that client when you interviewed with them and when you signed on that contract. And like the numbers almost don't matter as much as what expectation was set forth, and then making sure that you manage that expectation as you go. And like that's so important, especially with clients who are savvy to their numbers. Like we focus so much on, hey, this is what the numbers need to look like, but you don't look back on what expectation you set forth and what you promised them at the beginning of that job. And I think when those two things don't align, that's where you really run into trouble.
To that point, Tyler, I love that, because I've actually started over the last few years, when we give the final go or no go on a project, we put it at the top of that particular project in the Slack channel. We say, these are the goals for the project. We have a very explicit conversation with the client, owner's rep, architect, designer. Guys, this is what we are all chasing. We're all running toward the same thing. We talk financials, we talk schedule, we talk finishes, we talk how they want, all of those things. And I put it at the top of our Slack channel because we will frequently go back to it, because sometimes they forget, like, well, you know, when we started here, we didn't prioritize this or that. And I say, great, it's okay to move, and this will move. But having a North Star that's on paper has been super valuable for us in our firm.
Yeah, I feel like clients, they don't necessarily get upset that it costs more. They get upset when they think that it was included in the cost, right? Where it's like, that's the big difference that I think people don't realize.
Yeah, 100%.
Talk to me. This is all great, but when did it go wrong? Like, think about when you thought you had this process dialed and you fumbled.
Oh man, super easy comes to mind.
Of course, those are the hard to forget ones.
Getting collaborators on board too late, like that's, and I mean we have absolutely. You're shaking your head.
Like who?
Yes, both of you.
Like who?
Interior designer. Yeah. So started out. Client was originally had intended the architect to do interior architecture and design as well. They pivoted, and at framing they selected a firm that was even not US based. And nice. So, which introduced some more level of complexity.
Just for anyone listening, it's always at frame stage.
I thought you were going to say it's always the interior designer.
I wouldn't say that. But it's always interior. I mean, it's always frame stage when they're like, let's blow up the interiors. Yeah. I was like, okay. Yeah. Well, here's your budget.
My buddy just messaged me today. He's like, yeah, I'm on site with the framers today, and like the architect and the builder and the client are all fighting. He's like, I just didn't realize these houses got built as you were working through them. I was like, oh yeah, sometimes multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what ultimately happened on that project?
Everything went. It's a beautiful home, and we're just kind of putting the finishing touches on it right now. It was delivered about a year late, and it was. I think the financial implications of what we had started out at, even as you know, sort of precision focused as we are versus what got introduced, was definitely a bigger delta than one that we like.
Yeah.
And so beautiful home, but I would say great learning lesson, right? Which is always be absolute in terms of you know, before the shovel goes in the ground, that there needs to be super solidified, you know.
So aside from saying, all right, we would have walked away from this project, what do you think could have been done differently in hindsight when they brought that on to make this more successful? Like to be able to either
Like you can't go back
better
to the beginning.
capture that delta or at least assess what that is to make better decisions.
I think it's a great question, Tyler. And what I would say is to not change that decision, to pause the project.
Yeah.
And as hard as that is, that looking back would have been the thing to say, guys, we have to pause this project. We have to give the interior designers a chance to make their changes. We have to price everything out, and we have to let you guys know how much different this is going to be than what it was, because in essence, it became a completely different project midstream, right? This was not one or two change orders. This was a totally different home.
And internally, what did you guys feel that you, I guess, lapsed within your systems to be able to put that on pause? Was it just like, hey, we're already into it, let's just keep moving forward? Or did the changes come about, you know, one after another sequentially, where it's not that they turned over everything at once? Like what prevented you guys internally from saying pause, like we need to take a step back and reassess this entire project?
I don't think there was much appetite, more from the client side, to just completely put a pause on the project. And so we were trying to walk that fine, you know, do that kind of delicate dance between saying, guys, there's going to be some, you know, this is going to change, and working through that process, which is, But in an absolute ideal world, it's a full stop on the project.
Yeah, and to me, it's trust and it's expectations with this instance as well. Like, what do you feel this client would have said had you paused and gone back to them and been like, "Here's what the delta is actually going to be"?
They might have said, well, maybe we need to go back and revisit the architect designing the home.
Yeah.
Maybe.
There's so many roads that can go down. And to me, the success or failure of that job isn't necessarily one thing. It's a ton of things culminating together. But it just comes down to hitting the pause button and making sure that all stakeholders within that project understand the impact of the decisions that are being made, rather than we're trying to please the client because they don't want to pause, so we're going to keep moving forward. And at the end of the day, it's a year over on time. It's a year over on budget. Nobody's happy. And it's a beautiful home, but how much different would it have been had you just been like, this isn't going to work as is. But we're trying to make, in hindsight, it's so obvious, but in the moment, you're just trying to make everyone happy, and you're trying to keep the project progressing.
And what's kind of fucked up in that situation, because we've had two projects that this has happened on, is that, and we did not pause them, and there was definitely difficult conversations and people upset. And, Tyler, like you said, the hindsight's 2020, where we sat down with the client after, and both of them, in more words than less, communicated that if we hadn't been in a position where they felt as though their back was against the wall, they would have never built it.
Yeah.
And and that, you know, on one hand, I'm like, well, I hate the fact that we pressured you into doing this. But on the other hand, I'm like, but you're super stoked with the house and you're happy that you did it. And, you know, it you know, we had one client that literally was like, it changed my whole life. Like I've approached my entire business differently. Like it really tested me, but I'm happy that we stuck to it. And I'm like, you're welcome. Like this is such a weird, it's such a weird situation to be in, because I feel like, you know, on and some clients would be like, you pressured me into doing this, and that could be a terrible outcome. So it is interesting where, you know, Charles, you say like, I would have paused the job. It's like, man, like, you know, would you have ended up with the house is cool? Or would they have been able, like, they would have been upset about the pause, then you would have delivered bad information. Then they were like, all right, we're already paused, so let's pause longer and then figure out how we get back to a budget that makes sense. And, you know, if that's even possible. And next thing you know, it's like they have all this time to, you know, really think about, you know, the decisions that, you know, they dilute the hell out of it. And it's like, man, like, was that the right move? Like, you know, or is the dilution this like short-sighted financial gain, where it's like if they just stuck with it and we just forced the project, they would have recouped financially and been happier. And, you know, I guess all of this is really, you know, in support of you gotta figure this out before you start construction.
100%.
This is like, you know, we preach this to the moon and back, that, you know, pre-construction is everything. And if you know, we're cost plus, and, you know, you kind of shit on it a little bit ago, which is totally like valid, where it's, I don't necessarily want to be cost plus. It just makes sense from a contract standpoint. And, you know, I would love to just be like, hey, your house is going to cost, you know, $10.12 million. You know, and that's it. And like because we know exactly what's going to happen. We all know that it's not going to be 10.1 because they're going to add things, but that's not a contingency. That is straight up like add, you know, additional scope, right? And that's, you know, I mean, it comes back to what you said, is it's setting those expectations up front, being really thorough with pre-construction, but what you kind of advertise and what you talk about a lot is this, you know, executive summary report, which whatever you want to call it, it's just really great, thorough communication that a client can understand where the project stands in a snapshot. Like you said, you know, they're reading it on a plane or in a commute. Like the person next to you on the plane that's flipping through some paperwork, like that's what they're looking at, some sort of summary report. Whether it's for their business or personal life, like that's what they're reading. And it's and to be able to do and to think, you know, as a builder, you're giving them, here it is, here's your summary. It's you want them to be able to know what's happening in the project in a matter of a few minutes. And internally, we really harp on that. If a client reaches out asking for like, hey, what's the update on this, or what's going on with that, like, hey, that is a strike. Like, you know, why is that information? Why are they asking? Now, there's the unique, like, annoying client that will avoid all, you know, reports that we send them and ask anyway. But typically not. Like, typically they're like, no, you sent the information. It's right here. Like, we're good.
And Nick, if you remember, like at some point in time, the LinkedIn algorithm started giving me your feeds, and I was like, there's another builder in this country that sees the luxury residential construction world like I do, and that was you. And I think I reached out to you, but I mean, I want to double click on this just a little bit more, even how the kind of old way of doing things, and I'd love to hear, Nick, how you're doing it, but like this concept of site superintendent and project manager, site superintendent being the guy that opens doors and manages subs and that thing, and project manager being kind of the computer guy who's, I'm air quoting, he's, you know, pencil whipping the project and doing all the high level stuff, right? We don't ascribe to that. We assign one construction manager per project just for that. Our clients are Delta 360. Our clients are used to staying in 5-star places. When they want to know what's going on in their project, they pick up the phone and they talk to their construction manager. That's it. Like we identified who we're serving, and then we worked backwards from there, right? And I feel like it's completely different than maybe how most builders have built their playbook, candidly. And it might not even be their playbook, right? It might have been their dad's playbook and they're running it still, or whatever that is. And so anyway, that's just, we think like that with all of our systems and process and everything that we do. What would a ultra high net worth executive business owner, how would they like to be served this information or whatever this is?
Yeah, and the interesting there is that I'm sure that you just didn't do that and have it cost you money, right? It's not like, oh yeah, this is just the way that we're going to operate and run our jobs, but you don't have the client for that. Like, you have to understand what that cost is and what it's worth to the client to be able to establish that within your business. And like, that comes from understanding your value proposition, understanding the type of work that you want to do, understanding what type of money you want to make, what you can charge, what your business operating costs are. And like, you have to understand all of that to be able to work backwards from it, and vice versa, where it's like your marketing overlaps your numbers and your client and your value proposition and your market, and all those things dictate who and how to serve that client. But like, you can't have one without the other, and it's always evolving at the same time. But like, for you to have a principal on each and every job is a different cost than having a super and a PM that are running 3-4 different jobs. Like, but you have a different client that you're serving, so it makes sense.
Yep. I mean, it's the same thing with staffing ratios, with whether it's a Mon or Four Seasons versus staying at a Hyatt, right?
Correct.
I mean, like, it's two very different business models. And I think that people sort of, things get lumped in, but what I will tell you is it's allowed us to sit safely above the, what I call the race to the bottom. And Nick, I know you guys know, which is like, well, just give us a bid and we'll see where you guys shake out. And it's like, that's probably not going to be a good fit for us.
Yeah, you don't want to compete.
It's one of my favorite Hermosi topics, where he talks about either serve and be like the cheapest, or serve and only the ultra expensive. Everyone in the middle gets killed.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's just that is like, it's what kills businesses when you try to serve the middle market. And especially when like it's just a really hard market to serve. I will say is I have been been projecting this out. That same client who invited us to his 70th birthday party for his groundbreaking, we had a large format Vouv, we had Tiffany champagne glasses, we had a 4-piece violinist group playing. We invited, like, there was 30 people there. We did professional videography. Like, who the fuck does that stuff? Like, especially what. But you made it an experience.
Right? I don't want to brag right now, but I am writing with a Tiffany pen.
Are you really?
I love that.
Where'd you get a Tiffany pen?
Oh, my wife's had it since like college, and I just found it in the drawer. And I was like, "What is this T for?"
Bro,
and I'm looking on it.
I want that in your hat at all times.
That's exciting, actually. Yeah.
So hold on.
Sorry, Nick,
go
ahead.
No, that's okay. But I had to. I don't have someone to pull this up on the screen, so I pulled it up myself. But you said Delta 360. And I'm like, I've heard that before, but I never knew what it was. And I was reading through the exclusive perks. And the only one I want to call attention to is that they have tarmac transfers via private Porsche between tight connections at select hubs. I'm like, this. I want that. I want that. I want to hop in a Porsche and be like, bring me to my plane.
Yeah. The biggest problem I see is people trying to implement those type of things when they're not actually capturing the cost of those things. And I think it's like, it's either ego based, or they're seeing people do it online, or they're listening to this podcast and it's like, this is what we do and this is how we're differentiating. But it's like, if you don't have the client or understand what that costs you, you're just harming yourself more than anything else.
Tyler, you also have to, and I'll never forget when I went from developing historic homes in New Orleans, French Quarter Garden District, I thought I actually knew luxury, but I was actually just doing premium. Yeah. I learned luxury in London. I learned luxury doing private island development. There's a language of luxury that I would say is across different industries. It's whether you're shopping at Hermes or Louis Vuitton, or traveling and doing Four Seasons, or flying private, whatever it is, there is a language of luxury that I feel like builders have to understand and they have to be able to speak in order to serve clients at this top level. And if they don't, then I think that you're part of that race to the bottom. But I think that if you do, our clients want a builder that they can trust to say, because at the end of the day, guys, when our clients look us in the eye, they say one thing. They say, are we good? Are we good?
Yep.
That's it. And we look them back in the eye and say, well, we're golden. Right. And that's it. And they say the same freaking thing to their family office. They say the same thing to their operator of whoever is running their business or their board or whatever it is. Are we good? That's it.
So I have a question for you that may be long-winded. I'll try and get there as quickly as possible. But you moved to a new market. You started a business in a market that was new to you, that you were unfamiliar with. How much do you think like being from outside of that market actually helped you more so than just being one of like the good old boys from within there, where you're almost bound to like those localized rules, systems, constraints, and like even just have the blinders on from being like Park City market? Like, do you feel that coming in as somebody from out of town and just having a different mindset has helped you more than being somebody who was born and bred in Park City?
I think it's a great question, Tyler. I would say that for me, it's not as much geographic. I would say it was super helpful to come from outside of the industry. That was huge for me. And so it wasn't as much geographic. I feel like there were actually some challenges geographically. We had to fight you're just some new builder. Yeah. You don't know what you're doing. You haven't built mountain homes. Like, those were the uphill battles that we had to fight against architectural review committees and, subs and, all of those things. So the geographical fights were more kind of those types. But I would say, coming from outside the industry, I mean, that's the very framework of why our unique value prop is different. Coming from the ER, people ask me all the time, what was it like coming from the ER? And I said, when I explain it this way, you'll kind of say it's not that different. I mean, we have the highest stakes, whether it's building 8-figure luxury homes or potentially saving someone's life. We run teams that have different players, different actors that you have to tailor your leadership approach, your systems and process to that team. And you're managing and communicating data in a structured format. So when I say it that way, you're like, well, God, it's not that much different what you were doing in the ER versus what you're doing running a luxury residential construction firm.
Is there an emotional aspect to both? From like the emergency room side and what your career was there, and obviously dealing with clients, like were you able to, or are you able to insulate yourselves from that emotional aspect, whether in your last career or now?
The ER is a really, really challenging place emotionally, I would say. And having, I would say, enough on both sides to be able to compare them. When you're in the ER, it's your worst day of your life. Your kid's in there. You have a loved one in there. It's the worst day of your life. No one is like, oh man, I was having a great day, and then I went to the ER. It's the worst day of your life, and so you're dealing with everyone is having the worst day of their life, and so. Yeah, it's the TV show and it's the trauma and it's all those things and it's the dopamine hit. But I think that wears on emergency personnel over time. And I'm sure you have friends, but like there's not a lot of emotional recovery that comes in a place like that. And I would say that to me, albeit we have some challenging days and maybe some challenging weeks and whatever that is, that I know you guys can certainly speak to as well. But then we get all the good, right? Like we get to see these beautiful N of one art pieces come out of the ground, and I get to work and like understand like deep level of craftsmanship from people that have been setting stone for 2 or 3 decades of their life. Like I feel like this extremely high level of gratitude for the things that I get to do, because yes, you get some pain, but you also get the positive benefit of playing the long game and doing things the right way over a long period of time. When you set proper expectations, pick great clients, have a badass team, like see things and do things the right way, at the end of it, it's really good, and so and I know you guys know what I'm talking about, and I mean, that's why I'm in it. That's what I wake up every day. That's why I'm in it.
It's just, to me, it's such a fine line between like being able to compartmentalize the emotional aspect of our industry while also making business decisions, right? Like having empathy for clients while also making smart business decisions, because like having the emotion is what makes me a good business owner. It makes my clients like me. I'm like being a good steward for their home, their money, their family, which is the same thing as the medical industry. But then also there's times where like I need to step away from the emotional aspect and make good business decisions. And that's what's really difficult for me, to be able to properly distinguish between the two. But like I still need some of it. And it's the same thing as anxiety, right? Like my anxiety is what makes me a good business owner. It makes me able to execute at a high level. So it's like I take medication for anxiety, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to quell all of my anxiety, because then I'll be like, oh, whatever, good enough, I'm gonna walk away from it, right? And I think that like it's such a fine line between the two, owning a business, and I see a lot of similarities between what you did and what you're doing now, where it's like there's business decisions and emotional decisions, and they're always intertwined. It's so hard. I struggle with that more, I feel, than anything else. I think that you'd probably be well equipped to be handling it, coming from the field that you were in.
Yeah, I think it's just that every business owner struggles with that, right? Like, I mean, you want to advocate for your clients, but you also, like, if I'm not advocating for the business, who is, right? Yeah. And so, but you also face that with, maybe it's a personnel issue, or, a subcontractor issue, or whatever those things are. Like, it's lonely at the top. I mean, you can continue to strive to do things the right way, or you can be like every other shitty business out there. I mean, like, that's it. Like, there's only two paths, right? You can step over a piece of trash on a job site, or you cannot. Like, I see those as very binary things in my mind. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
Yeah. So what are you excited about next? What's next on the horizon? What's keeping you going? I mean, there can't be a ceiling, right? It's like, I feel like we all need something to chase. Yeah.
This might sound crazy. I'm chasing consistency in my life. I'm chasing emotional maturity. I'm chasing balance, which is a fool's errand, and I'm okay with that.
You think construction was the right move?
I'm chasing less amplitude on a daily basis. That's what I'm chasing. I'm chasing peace and joy right now in my life. And what I would say is that, to circle all the way back to kind of, that starvation anxiety, that in and of itself can just be a chase in and of it to itself. My wife and I have a joke, which is, I sometimes say this, still real, and I say, Lindsay, when we land this one, like, I'm gonna feel so much better.
Yeah.
And she said, you've been saying this most of your life.
Yeah, it's the arrival fallacy.
Yeah. And I kind of, I'm trying to give it up. I'm trying to hang it up. I'm really trying to, like, lose that monkey off my back, because there's just so much good. There's so much beauty in the world. There's so much happening on a daily basis. And, again, just like a level of consistency that I'm chasing has been foundational and so grounding in my life. It allows me to show up as a dad and as a husband, in addition to showing up as a business owner and a builder, because those things are as much or more important, to me than other people. And, I'll share this quote I read in my just daily reader. It says, it's a sacred thing to be able to feel a world many just move through. Don't ever let anyone take that away. And for me, like, I really do. When we're having a tough day at the office, or my family's going through something, or I feel, but I think that's also what makes me different. Different running a company, different as a boss, different as a builder, because I'm confident that we see things differently. We feel things on a different level than most other people. And I think that can be a superpower, but I also think that I have to constantly be aware of what the negative implications of that are and how I can mitigate those things.
Yeah. So if I could like push some and possibly make you a little uncomfortable, like, all of that sounds great. What does that actually look like from like a practical standpoint, right? Where it's like, I want consistency in my life on a daily basis. What's that look like for you?
I love that. I'm happy to share. So I used to wake up at 4:30 every morning. My wife said, no way. So I wake up at 5. That's our meet in the middle. Yeah, that's our compromise. I do 10 minutes of guided meditation every morning. It's like a light stretch routine. I do usually about 15 to 20 minutes of reading, personal growth reading in the morning time. Higher power connection, whatever that is for everyone, is certainly a part of that. And then I show up at the office at 6 a.m. every day, 6 days a week. I have, like I said, a very close kind of advisory group that I'm a part of. One's personal, one's business. Our family protects Sundays. Every Sunday is for families only. If one of our buildings is on fire, we call the fire department. I protect Sundays. That has been my space to devote to my family. I have a 10, 12, and 14-year-old. They're going to be out of the house pretty quickly. And so that is what balance looks like to me right now.
That's cool. I can respect that and appreciate that. It's difficult, and I think that you have not chosen two industries that make balance very easy. And I think it's been spoken about for years, as long as I've been in construction, where it's like, what's the work-life balance look like? And I don't know if there is a work-life balance. I think that, right, you only have so many cups that you can fill up, and you know, one's always going to have a little more in it. And I think long term it's just looking at making sure that everyone gets the little bit of love that's required. But I think it's not an easy industry to do that, and it can pull a lot from you.
I think that's what's been huge in helping in that is, I don't know what playbook you guys run it, but we run the Traction EOS playbook, and setting those kind of 3 and 5 and 10-year goals. It's the same thing, like just looking at what client do we want to serve and working backwards from that. I think it's been very much the same thing. Is like, what's that long-term, whether it's a financial goal, whether I still want to be on as an operator, working X amount of hours per week, whatever those things are. We sorted those things out. And so I know what I'm working toward and the things that need to happen in between, even now and the end of the third quarter. And then it's now and the end of 2027, right? And so I can break those things down and work backwards and identify what are the small actions that I can take on a granular level to achieve my goal in the future. And that's been really helpful for me, because I think very analytically and very systematically, and running that kind of EOS playbook's been super helpful.
Yeah, that's cool.
Charles, you're awesome, man.
Yeah, the insight is great, and it's so neat to see somebody who has two different careers and has the perspective and the similarities between the two, and just the lessons that you can apply from each, and then understanding how to balance that in life. I think that we're all probably at the point in our lives where it's like, yeah, we want to feed the ego enough, we want to work and do the jobs, but we realize that there's other things that we should be spending time on, that life's very short, and it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and just from a tactical standpoint, like, you know, you talk about being maniacal, and I find, you know, myself being very maniacal over certain things, but what I appreciate about you is that you have, I think, a much more clear direction as to like who you want to serve, and that ability to focus on one clientele allows you to be better at what you're doing. So just from an outside perspective.
No, I appreciate you saying that. That's been an evolution as well.
Of course, yeah.
Because I would say, when you come into market, maybe you're chasing more things and kicking tires on different things, and in reality, like figuring out like being really, really good at a very tiny strip of something is a really good position to be in.
Yeah,
totally.
The scarcity mindset. I feel like it's feast. We all think it's feast or famine. You start your business, especially relocating, and it's like, I'm going to do anything. Whoever calls me, and then you realize you're like, I'm not serving anyone, including myself now. By doing
this. A nightmare.
Yeah. When are you guys coming skiing this winter?
Hopefully soon.
I would love to. I got 2 and a third going into hockey, so that becomes
hockey
September.
Man. Yeah.
What mountain do you ski out there?
We skied Deer Valley mostly. Yeah.
I was out. Oh man, it had to be 15 years ago at this point. One of my wife's college friends' parents had a house in Deer Valley, so we skied there, which was sweet. Utah.
Tyler, if you go, I'll peel out and we'll go for a weekend. We'll take Delta 360. We'll get our Porsche. And
hell yeah!
We'll be out there.
Listen, I'll host you guys. We'll
as long as you get snow next year.
Yeah, we do need to get some better snow next year. But Deer Valley I think we expanded. We 2 or 2.5x in size skiable territory. They put in 40 miles of snowmaking. I mean, wow. It's some insane development that's happening out here. So that's where we're getting 4 seasons in Amman, and that's all going to be at base of Deer Valley East Village, they call it. So it's exciting.
That's sick.
Isn't Trapper out there, Nick?
Yeah. I think he
was telling us that Deer Valley just expanded a lot. Like that was just this past year, right?
Yeah, just this past year. I think they put in 7 new lifts, like crazy amounts of stuff.
Yeah. He's in Holiday. Is that close by?
Holiday's close, yeah. It's about 20 minutes away. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sweet. I would definitely make my way out. Utah's beautiful.
Let's do it. Charles, appreciate you being on, man. Good to always chat and digging into it and being an open book and super inspiring. Glad you caught my my LinkedIn and we've now developed this.
Yeah, man. Super cool. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. That's wild.
It's such a change. Yeah, it's such a change.
It's the first time I'm meeting him, and sometimes questions are difficult to ask. I think I asked it in a roundabout way where it's like, what did your parents think of this? We're of the generation where a lot of us, our parents were financially able to be like, hey, let's go to school, let's pay for your schooling. And it's like, could you imagine if, and this is not the case with him, but like, it's like, well, we paid for you to go to undergrad and then you went to med school and you're like, I'm going back into construction.
Yeah.
My parents were like, hell no, you aren't.
Yeah. Over my dead body.
Yeah. Nope. You're going to continue practicing medicine.
Yeah.
Now it's cool. It's right. You have that calling in life, and I think I have a lot of respect for people who chase down their dreams and go after whether it's a second career or just something else in life. When by all means they have it figured out and they have a steady job and they're making money and there's really no reason they could just coast and retire and be done with it. But it's like you have one life. Go after what you want and really just feed whatever is driving you to do what you're doing. I think I have a lot of respect for that, especially the older you get, the harder it is to change and to relocate with a family and start a new business and get out of your career of 20 years or however long it was. I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, I mean, I love these conversations, and especially, we, as you alluded to, connected on LinkedIn, and I realized that we had a lot of similarities in like going after similar markets and just similar strategies. But hearing him again today, just be like, yeah, man, like I'm just focusing on one super specific demographic and trying to do it really well. It's just a good reminder, I have I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, that's all we're marketing towards. But there's like 3 opportunities sitting on my desk right now that are big maybes, and I'm like, no, those are no's.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're doing it right, your business should be structured for specific type of jobs, for specific setups, for specific management. And I think that if you can build a business and a market around that and stay in your lane, you're optimizing all aspects of your business rather than, oh yeah, like we're set up to be doing this, but we can also do this. And now you're not playing by the same rules that you're accustomed to playing to, and it's difficult to really project, just like we said, expectations, the financial clarity of your business. It makes it more and more difficult the more things you have going on.
With that being said, guys, real quick before we do sign off, head over to moderncraftsman.co, sign up for the newsletter. It's the only way you're going to get the exclusive release of the episode with our show notes, but also where we're sharing all of the stuff that we've been working on. We have a huge launch coming up here on August 11th, which we're super excited about. But if you want more information, moderncraftsman.co, sign up for the newsletter. It'll be in your inbox.